Here in the Gamora page, right on top. I want to discuss a couple things that we did not finish the last night. Last year we were discussing the Balaturim, the beginning of the Balaturim in Orach. We had that we should every day say Korbonos every morning. We daven every morning. We daven every morning. And we quoted the Gamora in Titus and Chav Zayin. Abraham Avinu was speaking to the Rabbi how will I know that the Jewish people will inherit Eretz Yisrael? And God said that He will accept their Korbonos, their sacrifices as a sacrifice. And Hashem knew that there would be times that unfortunately it's not in existence. He said, they just say it. I will give them credit and they will be forgiven for all their sins. Therefore, it's very wonderful that a Jew should say the Korbonos every day, even though they don't daven it in most shows, in the Jewish Shapris. I give you the Eitzah Tevit to say it because if God's going to forgive you all your sins, I think you should take the time. That's between the brachos and the part I usually skip until before the Klas Bais David. Yes, with a translation. I have in my hand, which this sefer, which belongs to my son. It's called the Complete Art Scroll Siddur. It's published from Asura Publications, and it's a very, very exact. The first edition was in 1984, and the second in 1987, and very complete. It has all kinds of tefillahs in it. And among the tefillahs that we want to discuss yesterday was the Mon, Parshas Mon, the Balaturim. He said the Parshas Mon. So they say here in a little note, the commentators cite the Yerushalmi. Remember, there's two versions of the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud, which is according to the Babylonian Talmud, the Yerushalmi, which came out earlier, the Jerusalem Talmud. And the Yerushalmi, which is quoted quite extensively also in from time to time by the poskim. It's quoted, the commentaries cite the Yerushalmi, the one who recites this chapter every day is assured that his food will not be lacking. In other words, he'll have parnosa. The Lavush is one of the commentaries, the Achronim, explains this chapter teaches that God provides every day's sustenance. This is provided the manna each day in the wilderness. Here it is. It puts a Yiratzon in front of it. And we be real God, Lord of God. And it translates it here. It's on page 181. And well, you can do it after the tefillahs. Optional tefillahs. You'll find it if you got it. So Baruch Hashem, no problem. Page 181, 182, 180. Let me see, 181. I got 181. Remember, I quoted you. There is in Bereshit. In Beshalach. We have here Beshalach here. I'll quote this right now. In Beshalach, there is a Rashi talks about Yirmiyahu. Remember, I quoted that to you before. Yirmiyahu was talking to his generation that they should learn Torah. But yes. Oh, okay. So it has to be okay. It's fine. So you see it. Fine. You can purchase it in the Jewish bookstore. No problem. All right. Now, this is a pasuk in Be'erik Tesain, chapter 16 in Shemos, in Exodus, and pasuk Lamed Beis, verse 32. And this is what it says. This is the thing with this man that fell from heaven. Mishparis were watching, there was Sechem for your generation. You, as Alachem, in order that they shall see the bread, that I gave you to eat, and I brought you out of the land of Egypt. Rashi says, Lamed Beis, Mishparis, the Gnisa, that is to be stored away, so future generations see what it looked like. There was Sechem, your generations. The days of Yirmiyahu lived about 900 years after Yetzias Mitzrayim, during the time of the Korban Abayis Rishon, the destruction of the first temple built by his members of his generation. But Torah, why are you not engaged in learning Torah? I have repeated that so many times I lost track. I have admonished you that there's nothing greater than they said, if we leave our work, where will we make a living? They told the question. He brought out to them this contained with this manna that had been stored in the Beis HaMikdash. He said to them, you see the word of the Lord. Shimu lo olamar. It doesn't say, listen to the word of the Lord. Or see. In such a fashion, your forefathers were fed. Yesh lo lamakam la'ehin mazon li'reo. There are many agents there is to God. God is called Mokam, the seedus of the universe. Not that God is in the universe, but the universe is...
This you mean the lens, the sight, right?
Yes. La'ehin, to prepare mazon, food, for those who fear Him. See, that is one thing that we must always have. Munas Hashem. I've learned you through this before, perhaps we can do it again another time. We have a beautiful Rabbi Matai, who's a Rishon, who wrote commentary on the Chumash, and one of his beautiful Maimorim sayings is the beginning of Ma'aparchas Miketz in 6, where it discusses the emunah that a person must have in God, the faith in God. The truth is that a person must believe in God implicitly, completely. And he discusses there, and he quotes an earlier Rishon, Chovos Revovos, the duties of the heart, where a person goes through, enumerates 8 stages of developing in faith. First he has faith in his mother's breasts, and then his mother, and then eventually he gets understanding. He has to have faith in his father, and then eventually he gets a little older, and before you know it, he starts thinking he can do it, and then he finds out he can't do everything. And little by little it becomes apparent to him that he needs God more and more. Until finally it blossoms him the whole concept, if he ever reaches that point, where he knows God running the whole show. And therefore, if you have faith in God, of course, what we have to do is learn Torah, do the mitzvahs, have your Shemaim, and do everything we can possibly do to avoid doing, and then hopefully God will bless us the way we would like to be blessed. The coverage, unless you pay the premium. It's very simple. Now, let's go to the Gamora as we learned. This is anytime you have any disputes with your Shalmi or the Palmer, Loch is like the Babylonian town. The other Sefer, the Zohar, the Loch is like the Babylonian town. This is the Mokar, the final word, what it's supposed to be. All the codes are based on the Babylonian town. And we learn in Kesubas because it's literally, Kesubas means marriage contracts. We're learning it because it is called the key to Shas. It's one of the Gemaras we learn, and since this is, we're learning it. And we've learned prior to this time that a virgin lady should get married on the 4th day of the week, and a widow lady should get married on the 5th day of the week. Because they set up, by Ezra Sofer set up, one of the Takonas he set up was that they should have a Bezdin meeting on the 2nd and 5th days of the week. And therefore, if anybody was complaining that his virgin bride was not a virgin, and therefore he was defrauded, he could rise up early in the morning, get married Wednesday, consummate the marriage Wednesday night, which would be the beginning of the 5th day, and come up early in the morning, Thursday morning, and complain to the Rabbi, to the Bezdin, that he was defrauded, and presumably witnesses will maybe show up, and therefore we can go and clarify the matter whether or not it was a defraud or not. Cases were actually brought before the court and discussed it. It's very interesting, and I am sure you'll find it very interesting. Very interesting the way the cases come out. Usually it's the young man that loses the case. You see how God protects the daughters of Israel. Anyway, we start out, say for instance, their wedding was scheduled to become on another day, and it turns out it comes out on Wednesday. Is the young man obligated to his to-be bride the interim time before he actually gets through the 2nd stage of marriage? They had gone through the 1st stage, and now they have to go through the 2nd stage. In those days, you used to separate the 1st and 2nd stage for the bride to get the home chest together. Now, of course, we have both ceremonies at the same time, so we don't have this problem. But at the time of the Gamora, they did have this separation. And we come to the conclusion, like Rav Ashi, that if there was any kind of an accident, like this case, the decree of the rabbi, they won't permit you to get married except on Wednesday, he is not penalized and has to feed her until he actually marries her. When he marries her, it's not a penalization, it's just one of the bonus that a Jewish husband has to do for his wife. He in turn gets certain benefits from her, she gets benefits from him, and this is one of the benefits. And then the Gemara goes on to talk about, what about, we have two opinions, whether divorce is a claim of an accident that stopped a divorce that had been tried to be done on a condition, prerequisite. And then finally comes to the conclusion, majority opinion, that we won't stop stop the operation of divorce. Once divorce is, we declare it's final because we want to protect the daughters of Israel, those that are religious against themselves. They would not get remarried because they're fearful that maybe their first husband is still alive and they're not married, divorced from him. And the second case of irreligious types that unfortunately might remarry regardless of whether the first divorce was final, and they might have mamzerim, because obviously if a Jewish lady that's still married to one man lives with another man, has children with him, these children unfortunately are not kosher Jews, they are mamzerim, and a kosher Jew can't marry. Now that's the way we came to this point. Now we're going to go on Gimel, Almond Bays, and continue from that point on. I gave this a synopsis for those of you that are not very acquainted about them. To get married on Wednesday, so they have to, we do this in order, they don't have to necessarily agree with this Amor. And that was in earlier stages, these earlier stages, and also the places. The Mishnayos are the authorized set of Tanoim set up by Rabbi Yehuda Hanossi and his best. And these are the ones that the halacha is like. And the Rices are of a secondary nature, but they're still made by the same gentlemen, same authorities that made the Mishnahs. These are a greater authority. Then the Gamora has to have a backing from, and then later on we have the Rishonim. The Rishonim just can't pass in the din like this. They have to base on a Gamora or some other earlier authority. In our Achronim, period of Achronim, we can't just go by decisions. We have to base it on earlier decisions made by earlier sages. So my shakatu, what do we mean by the rabbis being diligent? The Tanya, we have a brisa. Not only Shmuel learned it, but we have a brisa which the Tanoim also created. Why do we say that a virgin lady should get married on the fourth day of the week? So if he has a complaint against her virginity, he finds out she was not a virgin, he would rise up early to go to the Bezdin. There the brisa asks the same question we asked earlier, and then Moshe asked, well, Shabbos, let him also get married on the first day of the week. She more than times between him, if he had a complaint against her virginity, basically rise up early in the morning. On Bezdin, you go up Monday morning. Also a Bezdin, there were meetings twice a week. Why not? So he says, no, getting married on Sunday wouldn't be a good idea, because he wouldn't have time to prepare for the wedding feast. Of course, nowadays we can get married any day, because we refrigerated and we had a time. And that's what they said then. It happens that any day of the week, you don't have this just twice meeting, but any day you can get married any time, except on Shabbos. Yes, you can get married any day. And a person should be moderating with the Suda, with the feast. She only 3 days. The Shabbos, the first day of the week. Sometimes the day is Shabbos, the 7th day of the week. Or sometimes it's Shabbos Shavuot, which is the right way. Or sometimes it's called Shabbos. Either way, it means a week.
When's this from? Is that from the time of
the truth is
Gamora, or is that from the time before the Gamora?
Actually, what it is, it's an indication of religious Jewish activities. This is one day in the Shabbos, in the week. And that's one of the reasons for that. After the Shabbos, the first day of the week. Sheni B'Shabbos, second day of the week. Shlishi B'Shabbos, the third day of the week. You can get married, the second stage of marriage. We're talking about they already got to the first stage. Yes, a Jewish marriage consists of 2 stages of marriage. The first stage is called Kedushi, Erison. Both terms are interchangeable. The second stage is called Chuppah, on the 4th day of the week. And we don't know what danger we're talking about. The danger to get married on the 3rd day of the week, not on the 4th day. And there was no protest in their hands from the sages. The sages did not protest it. They let them get married 1 day earlier, and the sages made it agreed to get married. So we only have, because of an accident, now changing the terminology. But the terminology is a danger. They're not supposed to get married except on Wednesday, and all of a sudden they can be accustomed to do it on Tuesday, nobody's complaining, and now it's perfectly permissible to get married. What are we talking about? This is the whole brisa is asking us to ask questions, and we will tomorrow. And we separate the bride, the new groom and new bride.
Force? Is that
Mafrishi?
Is that force or something?
To explain. Mafrishi. A Porsche means to separate. It's close by, but it's because it's we separate the groom from the bride. Laila Shabbos, the night of Shabbos, that means Friday night. The first one, the first Friday night of their marriage, presumably married that night, because he makes a wound. Presumably, we're presuming it's prohibited to make a wound. It says that you get a little of the laws of Shabbos, the laws of this, a little laws. You have a smattering of this, smattering of that, and no matter where else you go in the Gamora, oh, yeah, I learned a little about this in the Subah. And this is the beauty part about it. You're not strange. You've already had a preview of coming attractions. And this is one of the reasons why we learned this. So now this is the Brisa. So now the Gamora is trying to understand what we're saying here. You said a lot of words, but what does it mean? First thing it grabs on is the word, sakona. What does it mean? By if we say, the Amri, that they say, who's they? He said a pagan government had fiscal dominion over the Jews. For 2,000 years, the Jewish people have been living under the domination of foreign governments, not of their own making. And as a result, throughout the ages, they have been suffering persecution after persecution. Only now in our day are we getting to have an independent state of Israel. It's precious to be a free person. When you are oppressed, and in the ancient time they oppressed them, if you can imagine, even more than they oppressed them nowadays. So it says, pagan, first the pagan, later we're talking about, let's say, pagan Romans. If you say the law is of the pagan government, if a Jewish girl that's a virgin gets married on the fourth day of the week, the Orach shall be put to death. Very vicious. If that's the kind of decree they made, why do you say that people were accustomed not to get married? I have a danger to us people want to get married. I mean, this is a terrible thing. For a different day. If the pagans don't want to do it, they will get married. All right? Rabbi says, no, when we're talking about the danger, it wasn't a direct saying decree. The pagans, you're going to get put to death if you get married on the fourth day. No, that's what it's saying. The Amri, this is what the pagan government was saying. They said, if a virgin Jewish girl gets married on the fourth day of the week, she has to have sex first with the pagan governor first. If you can imagine the depravity and to have sex, the headmon to the governor, the governor to Tilo first. Tilo first.
Tilas, like praise? Or not, it's not a different word?
No, to Tilo, the beginning. They had such a horrible standard of morality that they conceive that this is a perfectly legitimate way of exercising government. Violate Jewish ladies. Yes.
Was that Goshen holiday or something?
We set up because the Jews got married on Wednesdays, and he would go and have his fling every Wednesday with all the Jewish girls that were getting married. That was his thing. In the meantime, he could always have his prostitutes in his palace all he wants. But on Wednesday, for a little spice, he would go into the town. This was against all rules of this. One of the fundamental concepts of the seven concepts, the seven fundamental rules applicable on all mankind, is that you're not supposed to engage in illicit sexual activity. That was one of the B'nai Noach, one of the commandments of B'nai Noach. These, unfortunately, these so depraved that they violate all of them. So this is one of them. It's a rape. It's an accident. The lady is not consenting to this. He's just raping her. It's getting a reaction from you. That is a good sign. You're listening. Meshum the because there are religious Jewish girls that follow. They would rather kill themselves rather than allow themselves to be raped. So in fact, it will be a sakona. You may call it a rape. The Jewish girl would not permit herself to be raped. She would rather kill herself. No, it should never happen. A Jewish wife is raped. Also, is if the Jewish wife is a lady and she is raped, that is against her will. There's no way in the world that she wants this to happen. The halacha is that her husband does not have to divorce her. He may keep her and still live with her. There's not anything she did, anything she wanted to do. If, God forbid, she happens to be the wife of a, regardless of the fact that she did not want to be raped, her husband must divorce her. even a regular Jewish girl. It's his family, he's called up to the shul. Such a person must be divorced by the husband. Incidentally, if it's not a rape, if a woman, God forbid, a married Jewish woman lived with another man, not a rape, but willingly, that is adultery. And then, of course, the husband must divorce her. He can't live, no matter what he is, Israel, maybe Goy. That is also considered. That's also a baratzon, willingness, and that is the thing. So if you're talking about of course, absolutely, that's a good thing of being a big time rabbi. I can give you decisions left and right. I should know, but all right, these areas things are a little bit. All right. So the Gemara says, all right, listen, the ordinary Jewish man, if he's a Yisrael lady, he doesn't have to divorce his wife. That's what you're worried about. So the doors to the honest showing. Let's explain to them the law that if they're raped, they're still permitted to live with their husband. If she was raped, it's something different. We're talking she's raped by. I see no reason why not.
What you're saying? It's the intent in her mind at the time that
the trouble is when you're dealing with a Jew. We're not dealing with a Jew. We're dealing with a goy here. Well, I would look up the halacha before I would paskin the halacha. But here, as far as my memory serves me correctly, it would be no impediment. But all right, so the doors to the Holy Shori. Let's explain to them if they're raped, they're still permitted to live with their husband. Well, I'm not talking about child. He must divorce the lady. He can't live with her.
The child becomes an arms.
So the child is not. He would be forced to divorce her. She would be divorced by the time he. Yes, you don't understand something. The Gamora, Rashi explains, if the governor finds out they're having weddings on Sunday, he'll come on Sunday. He just wants to have his fling. He doesn't care what day they set it. If they had it that way, then it would be difficult for him. But they didn't.
Well, that's what they...
Gamora is going to anticipate your difficulty. It's going to talk about it. Let's go further. Would you accomplish this? You understand? You understand up to now what we've been learning? The Gamora says, Ikaprutzas. There's also not religious girls, Jewish women. If they are raped by another person, they enjoy it. They want it, so it won't be a rape at all. It'll be intentionally, and therefore you can't make a general rule. If you go to bed with a Jewish governor, you're still permitted to live with your husband. No, because how do you know that the lady is not walking there? You understand that? Let's go further. Economic evidence is also the wives of Kohanim. They're boxed out, even if they didn't intend to be raped. So now the Gemara says, La'akri. All right, then if that's the case, let's uproot this decree of the Rabbonim and let's set it for a different day. Your question. That's all. See how quick minds. This was the question asked. Enter the Gamora, Gezerah, Avida L'Bitola. These decrees by the pagans were accustomed to be nullified, left and right. Anything that they do to persecute the Jews, they make a decree, one thing, and the other thing, they change it. They change their minds all the time. And the decree of the rabbis, in relation to a decree of those pagan governments, we don't uproot. Because we can stand our ground. In a very short time, they'll change their mind. Once they know that the Jewish ladies are not getting married on that day, because they got married a day earlier, so they'll stop coming to town to look for a little fling. You get it? It says, if that's the case, that they're getting married now on the third day of the week instead of the fourth day, like the Zakona sets up, if that's the case, so the governor will come one day earlier. He's hearing now the Jews in town are having their marriage wedding, so he'll change his schedule, and he'll have his fling on Tuesday. He'll come over Tuesday to have the first sex with each bride. That's what the Gemara asked that question. The Gemara said they'll go away. Well, they were so depraved that nothing but this was a permanent statute. They kept on moving. So he says, even on the third day that we can come and have sex. If there's a doubt in the governor's mind whether there's going to be weddings in that day on Wednesday, since the official decree of the rabbis is supposed to be on Thursday, since the official time of the rabbis is Wednesday, he won't uproot himself. In other words, he won't bother to come to the palace if they don't know what they're going to get married. Forget it. He'll go to his prostitutes. He doesn't need the Jewish girl. We want to discourage him from that activity. Okay. So the Gemara says, about quoting the Brisa again, will be shady, but on the second day, Lodi Kodesh. The Brisa says, but on the second day, On Monday, you shouldn't get married. The machas honest. But if there was an accident, first you call it sakona. Mutter, it's permissible. So you don't understand what the Bryce is saying in the latter phrase. It's disagreeing with its middle phrase. My honest. What do you mean by an accident? Now, if it is what we've been talking about before, there you call it a danger. Here you're calling it an accident. Make up your mind. You're going to call it something, call it the same term. Don't change and vacillate and tell us we don't know what you're talking about. Lasu, and also another question. Chasam, there in the middle part of the Baisa, you use the word noam. They were accustomed to get married on one day earlier, on the third day of the week. Also here in the latter part of the Baisa, you say mutter. It's permissible to get married even on the second day of the week. Why do you say over there they were accustomed? They didn't ask the question, but they did it. We don't throw it to us. Here, if they came and asked us, you're getting married on the second day of the week. Omar Rabbi. Rabbi says, Amre, they say, in the last part, starts above, the general of the army is coming to the city. When is the general army coming to the city? And he's coming to the city on the third day of the week. And therefore, we tell them, get married. He's coming to the city. He's coming to the city. Now, when the general of the army comes to the city, he's got a big entourage with him. So he needs a lot of food. What do? They grab all the food available that the Jews have. In this case, they set up food for a wedding. Oh, ideal. You don't have to go to many places, grab it all here, have enough for the general. They've been worried less about niceties of private property. How are we talking here, the Gemara says? If he's coming, he's going to stay here only a day and he's going to go a couple of days and go away. And we can still have it on the proper time. Lo Tzricha, says, no, that's not the case. The Aussie, he'll come, and he'll stay. So we can't delay the wedding, we have to go through with it. All right, so why permit us to get married on the second day of the week? The Gimel Me'olikonis, let them get married on the third day of the week. At least we'll have 2 days to prepare the wedding feast. If you get married on the second day of the week, you only have 1 day. He says, Isparabo, the day, his foreman, the general, the Gimel cost, so they come on the third day. That's the way it always is. Isparabo. No, that's a Greek or a Roman word. It's spelled in Aramaic language.
Those 2 words are one
Isparabo.
Is the is his in Hebrew.
Right. The Gimel cost, so they came on the third. They come on the third day, so they grab the food on the third day. So you can't get married on the third day. So you get married on the second day before even the 4 men come. Any questions so far? None. I will go further. That was in the ancient times. You have a situation where you have pagans making all kinds of evil decrees. Which is not appropriate nowadays, Baruch Hashem. We have evil decrees, but maybe not of that nature, although maybe I'm not knowledgeable in all these areas. Yes. It's not further and further. What's the problem? We let the Jews, the rabbis, don't pretend if they get married a day earlier, or even 2 days earlier. They're permitted to do so. Leave it on the books, and they circumvent any danger that they may have, either in the grabbing of the food or being violated. Does that answer the question? No. Now, that was in those days. Now, there's another application of what do you mean by an accident that you're permitted to get Ikedi Amri. The voice him, if you wish, you could say, my mapas, what does it mean because of an accident? Excuse me. Because of an accident, that we moved the time of the wedding. The Sanya, we learned another brisa. There was a situation where his bread was baked. And they have a big wedding. They have a lot of bread to bake. So they only baked all the bread. And of course, bread, if it's kept too long, it's stale. That's great. All right, you've already gone to expense. Any of you that have been at a wedding, Jewish wedding, unfortunately, nowadays it's not something, but earlier times, they went out to each other in expenditure. It's just unbelievable what money they would spend on a wedding. His bread was baked, the tofut kavua, and his slaughtering had been slaughtered. They used to slaughter several animals, not a little small wedding like some of you have been. Sometimes they had thousands of people at the wedding. They used to have wine. so strong, that wine so strong, that you couldn't drink it the way it was in the state, or original state. It was too powerful to drink. They'd have to water it down, a certain amount of water. They do the wine we drink today, same thing. We don't drink straight wine. It's too powerful to drink. And you have most of the wines you drink, certainly less than 50% grape juice. It's all mixture with water and other liquids for your edification. Anyway, the beauty of having wine that's not diluted is it will stay for a long time. Once you dilute it, if you don't drink it right away, you'll lose the taste of wine. She says, so Yenu Muslim, his wine was already poured, it was already mixed up. In other words, if you don't get the wedding on the road now, you're going to lose a lot of money. Bottom line. It should never happen, but it has happened, and unfortunately, it does happen from time to time. And right at the wedding, the excitement of the wedding, either, God forbid, the father of the person dies, right there, or the mother of the bride. Chaim, dies either the father of the groom, which should never happen, or should never happen the mother of the bride. These two are the ones that set up the marriage to take place. Usually, what do you got now? You got all this expense that you've gone through. It's not an easy thing to talk about, and it's very difficult to talk about it. But if you couple will ever get married, and who can afford to come out with many thousands of dollars and repeat it again? Where a person goes through, enumerates 8 stages of developing in faith. First he has faith in his mother's breasts, and then his mother, and then his father. He has to have faith in his father, and then eventually he gets a little older, and before you know it, he starts thinking he can do it, and then he finds out he can't do everything, and little by little it becomes apparent to him that he needs God. Until finally it blossoms him the whole concept, if he ever reaches that point, where he knows God running the whole show. And therefore, if you have faith in God, of course what we have to do is learn, have your Shemaim, and do everything we can possibly do to your Shalmi, or the Pamela, any other Sefer, the Zohar. This is the booklet, the final word, what it's supposed to be. All the codes are based on the Babylonian Talmud. We're learning Kesubas because, literally, Kesubas means marriage contracts. We're learning it because it's called the key to Shas. It's one of the Gemaras we learn in the Yeshiva. And since this is Yeshiva, we're learning it. And we've learned prior to this time, a virgin lady should get married on the 4th day of the week, and a widow lady should get married on the 5th day of the week. Because they set up, by Ezra's Korbonos he set up, was that they should have a Bezdin meeting on the 2nd and 5th days of the week. And therefore, if anybody was complaining that his virgin bride was not a virgin, therefore he was defrauded, he could rise up early in the morning, get married Wednesday, consummate the marriage Wednesday night, which would be, and come up early in the morning, Thursday morning, clarify the matter whether or not it was cases were brought. And very interesting the way to. Anyway, we found out it was scheduled to come on another day, it comes out on a Wednesday. The young man, interim time before he actually gets through the second stage of marriage. They've gone through the first stage, and now they have to go through the second stage. In those days, you used to separate the first and second stage for the bride to get the home chest together. And nowadays, of course, we have both ceremonies at the same time, so we don't have this problem. But at the time of the Gamora, we did have this separation. When we come to the day, if there was any kind of an accident, that, like this case, a decree of the rabbi, they won't permit you to get married except on Wednesday, he is not penalized and has to feed her until he actually marries her. And when he marries her, it's not a penalization, it's just one of the bonus that a Jewish husband has to do for his wife. He in turn gets certain benefits from her, she gets benefits. And then the Gamora goes on to talk about, we have 2 opinions, whether divorce is a claim of an accident to stop the divorce that have been trying to be done on a condition, prerequisite in the majority opinion, that we won't stop the operation of divorce. Once divorce is, we declare it final because we want to protect the daughters of Israel, those that are religious against themselves. They would not get remarried because they're fearful that maybe their first husband is still alive and they're not married. These divorces, a second case, are religious types, and unfortunately might remarry regardless of whether the first divorce was final. If a Jewish lady that's still married to one man, lives with another, has children with him, these children unfortunately are not kosher Jews. They are mamzer who can't marry them. Now that's the way we came to this point. Now we're going to go on Gimel and continue from that point on. I gave this a synopsis for those of you that are not very acquainted with the first and a half. Gemara asked the question, why should do? Why give them to get married on Wednesday so they have 3 days ahead of time to get prepared for the wedding feast? They didn't want them to not have a proper wedding. If you're talking about what we learned earlier, because at the beginning of the discussion we quoted, we do this in order to give 3 days to prepare for the wedding. It was an Gamora. They don't have to necessarily agree with this Gamora. So why do they have to agree with him? So my Shabbat, Gamora said the Stani will have a price here. The price were made by the same men that made the Mishnah. And that was in earlier stages, these earlier stages, and also the price. The Mishnayos are the authorized sayings that the Tanoim set up by Rabbi Yehuda and us, that these are the ones that the halach is like, and the miraculous are the secondary. These are a greater authority than the Gamora. The Gamora has to have a backing from, and then later on, when you have the Rishonim, just can't possibly in the din like this. They have to base on a Gamora or some other earlier authority. And in turn, we even our Achronim, we can't just go and make decisions. We have to base it on earlier decisions.